One day, a billionaire came home earlier than usual, and what he saw changed his entire life. His own wife was kicking the poor maid's innocent son to the ground without mercy, but the very next moment, what happened shook the entire city. Let's continue this story. The city lights flickered outside as the clock struck 6 in the evening. Daniel Rhodes, one of the wealthiest men in the country, had just finished an important business meeting earlier than expected. For most billionaires, evenings were reserved for grand events, charity galas, or endless boardroom discussions. But tonight, Daniel simply wanted to return home quietly, without the fanfare, without the chauffeur, without his staff preparing for his arrival. He asked the driver to drop him 2 blocks away and decided to walk the rest of the way, enjoying the rare feeling of being an ordinary man heading home to his family. He had no idea that this small decision would completely change his life forever. The Rhodes mansion stood like a palace, bathed in golden light against the twilight sky. To outsiders, it was a symbol of success, luxury, and perfection. To Daniel, it was supposed to be a safe haven, where love and warmth replaced the coldness of the outside world. He carried flowers in one hand, smiling at the thought of surprising his wife, Victoria. She always complained he was too busy, too absent, and tonight he wanted to prove he still cared. But as he stepped through the side gate, choosing not to alert the staff, he froze at the sound of something unusual, screaming, followed by a sharp cry. It was the cry of a child. Daniel's heart raced. He followed the sound toward the garden, his footsteps light but hurried. The evening air carried the echo of pain, and then he saw it, a sight that made his blood run cold. On the perfectly polished marble floor of the patio, Victoria, his elegant and glamorous wife, stood towering over a young boy. The boy was no more than 10 years old, his dark skin glistening with tears, his small hands raised to shield himself. And then, to Daniel's horror, he saw Victoria's foot lash out, striking the boy in the side. The child fell back, whimpering, his tiny chest rising and falling rapidly as he gasped for air. Daniel dropped the flowers instantly. "Victoria, what the hell are you doing?" His voice thundered across the garden, carrying the weight of both authority and disbelief. Victoria spun around, startled, her face pale for a moment before hardening into an expression of annoyance. "Daniel, you're home early." Her voice was cold, as if she had been caught doing something trivial, not cruel. The boy tried to scramble to his feet, clutching his ribs. He looked terrified, not only of Victoria but now of Daniel too, unsure if this powerful man would be another monster. Daniel rushed forward and knelt beside him, gently placing a hand on his shoulder. Hey, it's okay. You're safe now. Tell me, are you hurt badly?" The boy shook his head quickly, though his watery eyes betrayed the pain he felt. Daniel's jaw tightened as he noticed a bruise forming. He looked up at Victoria with fire in his eyes. "Explain. Now." Victoria crossed her arms, her diamond bracelet catching the fading light. This brat was stealing from us. I caught him sneaking around the kitchen. I won't tolerate thieves in my house." Her voice was sharp, filled with disdain. "Besides, he's just the maid's son. They're lucky we even let them live under our roof. Don't act like this is some tragedy." Daniel could barely process the venom in her tone. "The maid's son? You're talking about Lydia's child." Lydia had been their housemaid for nearly 5 years, a quiet, hard-working woman who rarely asked for anything. She lived in the small quarters at the back of the mansion with her only son, Marcus. Daniel had always admired her dedication, her humility, and the way she never once complained despite the endless demands placed upon her. To imagine her child being treated like this, kicked and humiliated by his wife, made his blood boil. "Victoria, are you insane? He's a child." Daniel's voice cracked with anger. "Even if he made a mistake, even if he took something, this is not how you handle it. You don't lay your hands, or your feet, on a boy who has no one else to protect him." Victoria rolled her eyes, stepping closer. "Don't act so noble, Daniel. You think people like them don't deserve discipline? They're not like us. He has to learn his place. And if Lydia has a problem, she can leave. There are thousands of maids who would line up to work here." Her words cut through the air like a knife, dripping with arrogance. The boy, Marcus, looked from Victoria to Daniel, his eyes wide with fear. Daniel gently pulled him into his arms, shielding him from her glare. "No, Marcus," Daniel whispered, loud enough for Victoria to hear. You don't have to be afraid. No one will hurt you again. Not in this house. Not ever. Marcus clung to his shirt, trembling. For a moment, silence hung heavy in the garden. The flowers Daniel had brought lay scattered on the marble floor, a painful reminder of the evening he had planned. He had come home to surprise his wife with love, but instead, he had stumbled upon her cruelty. Daniel looked at Victoria as if seeing her for the first time. The woman he thought he knew, the woman he had built a life with, stood before him like a stranger, heartless, entitled, and merciless. Victoria scoffed, flipping her hair back. So what now? You're going to play the hero for the maid's boy? Don't forget who I am, Daniel. I am your wife. You wouldn't dare humiliate me in front of the staff. Daniel stood slowly, his protective arms still around Marcus. His eyes, once filled with shock, now burned with a quiet determination. Victoria, you have no idea what you've just done. But I promise you, everyone is going to find out. And you won't be the one standing tall after this. The evening that began with flowers and hope had transformed into a storm. Daniel's next move would not only decide the fate of Marcus and Lydia, but would also expose the truth about the kind of woman his wife truly was. And deep down, Daniel knew, nothing in his life would ever be the same again. The night grew colder as Daniel carried Marcus inside, away from the garden where Victoria's cruelty still lingered in the air. The boy's small arms clung tightly around his neck, trembling with every breath. Daniel gently placed him on the living room couch, grabbing a soft blanket to wrap around his tiny frame. The mansion, usually filled with glittering chandeliers and the hum of servants attending to Victoria's whims, felt unbearably silent. The only sound was Marcus's shaky breathing and the distant echo of Victoria's heels clicking as she followed them inside. Lydia came rushing from the kitchen the moment she heard her son's muffled sobs. Her face went pale, and her eyes widened as she saw the bruise forming on Marcus's ribs. She dropped the dish she was holding, the plate shattering into pieces on the marble floor. "Marcus!" she cried, falling to her knees beside him. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she cupped his face. "Baby, what happened? Who did this to you?" Her voice shook with both fear and desperation. Daniel's eyes locked on Victoria, who stood by the door, arms crossed, her expression icy. "Tell her, Victoria," Daniel said, his voice steady but edged with fury. "Tell Lydia exactly what you did." Lydia looked up, confusion and terror in her eyes. What do you mean?" she whispered. Daniel crouched beside Lydia, his hand gently squeezing her shoulder. She kicked him, over and over, like he was nothing. "I saw it with my own eyes." Lydia gasped, her trembling hand covering her mouth. She turned her tear-filled gaze to Victoria. How could you? He's just a child. He's my son." But Victoria only scoffed, her voice dripping with disdain. "Your son is a liar and a thief. He was sneaking around in my kitchen. Don't play the victim here, Lydia. You should be grateful we even let you and your boy live under our roof. I could have had you both thrown out tonight." Her coldness sent shivers down Daniel's spine. Daniel rose to his full height, his powerful frame casting a shadow across the room. "Enough. You've said more than enough," he growled. His eyes met Lydia's, softening as he turned to her. "Lydia, listen to me. You and Marcus are not going anywhere. Not tonight. Not ever because of her. I will make sure of that." Lydia's lips quivered as she nodded, unable to speak through her tears. She pulled Marcus into her arms, rocking him back and forth, whispering soothing words through sobs. Victoria's face twisted with anger. "Daniel, don't you dare undermine me in my own house. I am your wife. I have every right." "No," Daniel cut her off sharply, his voice echoing in the vast living room. "You have no right to harm a child. Not in my house. Not under my name. What you did tonight will never be forgotten, Victoria. And if you think your status as my wife gives you immunity, you are sorely mistaken." The staff began to gather quietly at the edges of the room, drawn by the commotion. Their eyes darted nervously between Daniel and Victoria, sensing the storm brewing. Some had suspected her cruelty for years, the harsh words, the subtle acts of power she wielded over them when Daniel wasn't around. But none of them had dared speak out. Tonight, however, it was no longer hidden. Tonight, it was in the open. Victoria's voice rose, sharp and shrill. "So, you're going to humiliate me in front of the servants now? You'll believe a maid and her brat over your own wife. Do you even hear yourself, Daniel? Daniel stepped closer, his voice low but filled with conviction. I don't need to hear myself. I saw what you did, with my own eyes, and I will never forget it. You crossed a line, Victoria, a line from which there is no return. Marcus whimpered softly, his small hands clutching Lydia's dress. Daniel knelt once more, brushing a stray curl from the boy's forehead. Marcus, I need you to be brave, okay? You didn't do anything wrong. You are not a thief. You are not worthless. Don't ever let anyone make you believe otherwise. The boy blinked at him, tears spilling silently down his cheeks, and gave a small nod. Victoria's face reddened with fury. You're pathetic, Daniel. Letting a child manipulate you with tears. You'll regret this. When people hear that the mighty Daniel Rhodes chose a maid and her son over his own wife, they will laugh in your face. But Daniel only shook his head. No, Victoria. When people hear the truth, when they see who you really are, they won't laugh at me. They'll recoil from you. Because what you've shown tonight isn't strength, it's cruelty. And cruelty always destroys itself. The weight of his words settled heavily in the room. The staff exchanged uneasy glances, some lowering their eyes, others quietly nodding to themselves. They had all seen pieces of Victoria's arrogance, but this was beyond anything they could have imagined. Lydia pressed her lips to Marcus's forehead, whispering a prayer, her voice breaking with emotion. Daniel placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. I'll make this right. I promise you. No one will hurt him again. Victoria stormed toward the staircase, her heels clicking like daggers against the floor. You'll regret this, Daniel. Don't forget who controls your reputation, your social standing, everything you've built. She spat before disappearing upstairs, slamming the bedroom door shut with a force that rattled the chandeliers. Daniel exhaled deeply, his hands trembling slightly as the adrenaline coursed through him. He turned back to Lydia and Marcus, his gaze steady. You both stay here tonight. I don't care what she says. I'll deal with her. But you. He looked at Marcus, his tone softening again. You are safe. Do you understand? Safe. Marcus sniffled, finally leaning into his mother's embrace. And for the first time since Daniel walked in, his small body began to relax. That night, as the mansion grew quiet again, Daniel sat in his study, staring out at the city lights. His mind churned with questions. How long had Victoria hidden this side of herself? How many times had she hurt others when he wasn't around? He had built an empire with discipline and fairness, priding himself on being a man of integrity. And yet, under his own roof, cruelty had been festering, unchecked. He clenched his fists, his reflection in the glass window staring back at him with determination. Something had to change. And Daniel knew that change would start now. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the Rhodes mansion, casting golden rays across the marble floors. For most, it was a new day, a fresh beginning. But for Daniel, it was the weight of a storm still hanging heavy from the night before. He hadn't slept. He had sat in his study for hours, replaying the moment he had walked into the garden and seen his wife's foot collide with a helpless child. No matter how he tried, the image would not leave him. It was etched in his mind, seared into his conscience. And the more he thought about it, the more determined he became to act. Downstairs, Lydia moved quietly in the kitchen, preparing breakfast for Marcus, who sat at the table, silent but calmer than he had been last night. His ribs were still sore, but Lydia had applied ointment and wrapped him gently, whispering prayers as she did. Marcus poked at his food, still wary, still uncertain. Every creak of the mansion made him flinch, afraid Victoria might appear again. Daniel entered the kitchen, his presence commanding but his expression soft. Good morning, he said quietly, his voice breaking the silence. Lydia rose immediately, bowing her head slightly out of habit. Good morning, sir. Daniel shook his head. Please, Lydia, don't call me sir. Not today. Not after everything. His tone was heavy, sincere. Lydia nodded, her eyes moist. Thank you for last night. For standing up for Marcus. If you hadn't come home early. Her voice faltered, unable to finish the thought. Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder, steadying her. I don't even want to imagine what would have happened. But I did come home early. And maybe that was no accident. Marcus looked up at him shyly. Daniel crouched beside him, lowering his voice. How are you feeling, buddy? Marcus hesitated before whispering. Better. But I'm scared she'll be angry again. Daniel's chest tightened at the words. Listen to me, he said firmly, locking eyes with the boy. You don't ever have to be scared of her again. I won't let her touch you. Not ever. You hear me?" Marcus nodded slowly, some of the fear in his eyes replaced by a fragile sense of trust. Lydia watched the exchange with silent gratitude, her heart aching and relieved all at once. Upstairs, however, Victoria had no intention of apologizing. She had spent the night making calls to her closest friends in high society, painting herself as the victim of an overreaction. "Daniel embarrassed me in front of the staff," she whispered over the phone to a confidant. "He's lost his mind, taking the side of a servant over me. If this gets out, it'll ruin us." But what Victoria didn't realize was that the staff had already begun whispering among themselves. Stories of her arrogance and cruelty were spreading quickly. For years, they had been silent, but now they had a witness with power, Daniel himself. And the truth was a fire that could no longer be smothered. Later that afternoon, Daniel called Lydia into his study. Marcus sat curled in a chair nearby, clutching a book Daniel had given him. "Lydia," Daniel began, his tone gentle yet direct. "I need to ask you something important. Has this ever happened before? Has Victoria ever hurt Marcus or you in any way?" Lydia froze, her eyes darting to the floor. She twisted her hands nervously, torn between fear and honesty. "Please," Daniel urged softly. "I need the truth. No more secrets." Lydia swallowed hard. "Yes," she whispered finally. "Not like last night, but she shouted at him before. Called him names. She's threatened to throw us out so many times. I tried to protect him. I tried to keep him away from her. But I couldn't always be there. I thought I had no choice. We needed the job, the roof over our heads." Tears streamed down her face as she spoke, her voice breaking under the weight of years of silent suffering. Daniel's fists clenched, his jaw tightening. "You had no choice because you thought I wouldn't believe you," he said bitterly. "Because I wasn't here to see it myself. Lydia, I'm sorry. I should have been paying attention. I should have known." Lydia shook her head quickly. "No, sir, Daniel. It's not your fault. Victoria, she hides it well. She's different when you're around. I didn't want to risk losing everything." Daniel leaned forward, his eyes fierce but kind. "You will never have to make that choice again. Not while I'm here." At that moment, Marcus looked up from his book and whispered, "Mr. Daniel, are you going to send us away?" Daniel's heart broke at the question. He knelt in front of the boy and smiled softly. "No, Marcus, I'm not going to send you away. I'm going to protect you. And I'm going to make sure no one, not even Victoria, ever makes you feel small again. You're part of this house now, as long as you want to be." Marcus blinked, surprised by the words, and for the first time, a small smile tugged at his lips. It was faint, but it was real. But peace did not last long. That evening, Victoria confronted Daniel in the grand hall. She descended the staircase like a queen, her gown flowing dramatically, her face set in icy resolve. "Daniel," she said sharply, "I've spoken to my lawyers. If you continue down this ridiculous path of defending a maid and her son, I will make sure the world hears about how unstable you've become. You think the board of your companies will support a man who sides with servants over his wife? You'll lose everything." Daniel met her glare with unwavering calm. "Do you really think money and power are worth more to me than a child's safety? Do you think my reputation matters more than my humanity?" His words struck like thunder. "Victoria, the only one who stands to lose everything is you. Because the world is going to see who you truly are." Victoria sneered. "And who will believe you? Me? Or a crying maid and her pathetic son?" Daniel took a step closer, his voice steady as steel. "They'll believe me, Victoria, because I saw it, because I lived it, and because I'll make sure everyone knows the truth." For the first time, a flicker of doubt crossed her eyes. Daniel's conviction was unshakable, and somewhere deep down, she realized her grip on the Rhodes Empire was slipping. The mansion, once a symbol of perfection, now stood at the edge of war. A war not of wealth or status, but of truth versus cruelty. And Daniel knew this battle was only beginning. The following days in the Rhodes mansion felt like walking on a knife's edge. The staff whispered in hushed tones, avoiding Victoria whenever she appeared, their eyes carrying a mixture of fear and anticipation. Lydia kept mostly to Marcus's side, never letting him out of her sight, as if she feared a shadow might rise up and harm him when she wasn't looking. And Daniel, he moved with quiet purpose, speaking little, watching everything. He knew the storm was coming, and he was ready to face it. One evening, Daniel arranged a dinner in the grand dining hall. The long table was set with polished silverware, crystal glasses, and a lavish spread of food that none of the staff dared touch until instructed. Victoria entered late, her chin high, draped in pearls and diamonds, her eyes filled with disdain. She sat across from Daniel, refusing to acknowledge Lydia and Marcus, who had been invited to join. The atmosphere was thick with tension, as if the walls themselves held their breath. Daniel lifted his glass, his voice calm but commanding. "Tonight, I want to address something important," he began, looking directly at Victoria. "For too long, cruelty has hidden behind wealth in this house. That ends now." Victoria let out a mocking laugh. "So this is what it's come to? Public lectures at dinner? What's next, Daniel? Press conferences where you hold hands with the maid's boy and play the saint?" The words dripped with venom, but Daniel didn't flinch. Instead, he turned his gaze to Marcus. "Marcus," he said gently, "tell everyone what happened that night." The boy froze, eyes wide, his small fingers gripping Lydia's hand. Lydia shook her head softly, whispering, "You don't have to, baby, if you're not ready." But Daniel's eyes carried no pressure, only encouragement. "You're safe here," he assured him. Marcus swallowed hard, his voice trembling as he spoke. She kicked me. I was just looking for bread in the kitchen because I was hungry, and she called me a thief. She said I was nothing. But Mr. Daniel told me I'm not nothing." The staff shifted uncomfortably, some looking at Victoria with visible disgust, others holding back tears. Lydia pulled her son close, her eyes glistening with pride at his courage. Victoria slammed her glass down, the sharp crack echoing through the hall. "This is outrageous. You expect me to sit here and listen to lies from a child?" Her voice rose, shrill and unsteady. "Daniel, end this circus right now." But Daniel didn't budge. His voice remained calm, though it cut sharper than a blade. "The truth doesn't need defending, Victoria. It speaks for itself. And tonight, everyone has heard it." The staff, emboldened by Daniel's stance, began murmuring. One of the older maids finally stepped forward, her hands trembling as she spoke. "Sir, if I may, it wasn't the first time. Madam has often scolded us harshly. She once threw a tray at me for serving tea too slowly." Another nodded quickly, and she slapped the gardener's boy when he brought in muddy shoes by accident. The floodgates opened. One by one, the staff spoke up, their voices timid but resolute, recounting years of humiliation and cruelty at Victoria's hands. Daniel listened silently, his expression hardening with each testimony. Victoria, on the other hand, turned pale, her arrogance cracking as the weight of their words pressed down on her. "You traitors," she screeched, her voice breaking. "After everything I've given you, luxury, shelter, you dare stand against me?" But her words only confirmed what they already knew. Daniel stood, his chair scraping softly against the marble floor. "Luxury means nothing if it comes with chains," he said firmly. "Shelter means nothing if it hides abuse. Victoria, your reign of cruelty ends tonight." His words thundered through the room, leaving no doubt. Victoria's eyes blazed with fury. "You think you can ruin me, Daniel? I am your wife. Half of everything you own is mine. You can't erase me." Daniel took a deep breath, his eyes locking onto hers with unshakable determination. "You're right. Legally, you may own half. But morally, after what I've seen, you own nothing in my heart, nothing in my respect, and nothing in this family. I'd rather lose every cent than keep silent about what you've done." Lydia's breath caught in her throat at his words. The staff stood taller, their eyes filled with admiration and relief. For the first time, they saw Daniel not only as a powerful man of wealth, but as a man of justice. Victoria rose abruptly, her chair toppling behind her. "You'll regret this," she spat. "If you think the world will side with you against me, you're delusional. I'll drag you through the mud. I'll tell everyone you've gone mad, defending servants over your own blood." Her words hung heavy in the air, but Daniel remained calm. He placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder, steadying him, then turned back to the staff. "The truth has been spoken, and the truth always wins in the end." With that, Victoria stormed out, her heels clicking like hammers of rage against the marble floor. The heavy doors slammed shut behind her, the sound reverberating through the mansion. Silence followed, broken only by Marcus's small, steadying breath. Daniel looked around the room, meeting each pair of eyes. "From this day forward," he said firmly, "no one in this house will live in fear. You are not servants, you are people. And in my home, you will be treated with dignity." His words washed over them like light after a storm. Some wept quietly, others bowed their heads in gratitude, but all of them felt the shift. Something had changed forever. Later that night, Daniel tucked Marcus into bed in one of the guest rooms, a safe haven far from the dark memories of the garden. "Sleep well, Marcus," he whispered, smoothing the blanket. "You're safe now, I promise." Marcus smiled faintly before closing his eyes, the weight of fear finally lifting. As Daniel left the room, he knew the battle with Victoria wasn't over. She would fight, scheme, and lash out. But deep inside, he also knew something stronger. Cruelty had finally been unmasked, and once exposed, it could never regain the power it once held. The days that followed were filled with tension, but also with a new sense of hope. For the first time in years, the mansion felt different. The staff no longer walked on eggshells, their shoulders eased, their steps lighter. Lydia noticed Marcus smiling more, playing in the garden without looking over his shoulder in fear. Daniel watched quietly, a mix of pride and guilt swirling in his chest. Pride because Marcus was healing, guilt because he hadn't noticed sooner what Victoria was capable of. But one truth became clear to him. Protecting Marcus and Lydia was no longer a choice. It was a responsibility etched into his soul. Victoria, however, was far from finished. She spent her days locked away in her wing of the mansion, her phone pressed to her ear, her voice low and venomous as she plotted her revenge. She called friends, lawyers, and socialites, spinning her story of betrayal, of a husband who had lost his senses and disgraced her by siding with the help. But cracks were already forming in her web of lies. Word of the dinner confrontation had spread, carried by the whispers of staff who had families, who had friends, who had connections beyond the mansion walls. Truth, once released, was like smoke, impossible to capture again. One evening, Daniel returned from a meeting in the city. As he pulled into the driveway, he saw Marcus waiting by the fountain, clutching a small sketchbook. The boy ran up eagerly. "Mr. Daniel, look," he said, flipping the book open to reveal a drawing of a man holding a child's hand, walking together under a big tree. "That's you and me," Marcus explained shyly. Daniel felt his throat tighten, emotion swelling in his chest. He knelt, looking the boy in the eyes. "That's beautiful, Marcus. And I want you to know something. You'll never have to walk alone again. Not as long as I'm here." Marcus smiled, the innocence of childhood slowly returning to his eyes. Inside, Victoria awaited him with fire in her gaze. "Daniel," she snapped, her voice sharp as glass. "I've spoken to the lawyers. If you try to embarrass me publicly, I'll take you for everything you have. Do you hear me? Everything." Daniel didn't flinch. He stepped closer, his eyes steady, his tone calm. "Victoria, you don't understand. You've already lost everything. Money, houses, status, those things mean nothing without respect. And after what you did, you'll never have mine again." Victoria scoffed, but her confidence faltered when Daniel added, "Tomorrow, I'm calling a press conference. The truth is coming out. The world will know what you did. They'll know what kind of person you are." Her face went pale, fear flickering across her features for the first time. "You wouldn't dare," she hissed. Daniel leaned in, his voice steady as steel. "Watch me." The next day, reporters gathered outside the road's foundation headquarters. Cameras flashed as Daniel stepped onto the podium, Lydia and Marcus standing quietly behind him, supported by the staff who had suffered in silence for years. His voice carried strong and clear across the crowd. For too long, people believe that wealth gives someone the right to treat others as less than human. But wealth does not excuse cruelty. Power does not excuse abuse. Last week, I witnessed something I can never forget, my own wife harming a child, our maid's son, with violence and disdain. Today, I stand here to say this: enough is enough. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The reporters scribbled furiously, microphones leaning closer. Daniel continued, his conviction unwavering. Lydia and her son Marcus are part of this household, and they will be treated with dignity. No amount of status or money justifies treating them, or anyone, like they are beneath us. If I lose friends, if I lose standing, so be it. I would rather lose the world than lose my soul. The staff behind him nodded through tears, their courage reinforced by his words. Lydia held Marcus close, whispering reassurances into his ear. The boy looked out at the sea of cameras, no longer with fear, but with pride. Within hours, the story spread like wildfire. News outlets broadcasted Daniel's speech. Social media exploded with support. Hashtag Justice for Marcus trended worldwide. Thousands praised Daniel for his courage, for using his power not to hide the truth, but to shine a light on it. And as the world rallied behind him, Victoria found herself isolated, her friends turning away, her reputation crumbling like sand slipping through her fingers. That night, back at the mansion, Daniel sat with Lydia and Marcus in the garden, the same garden where everything had begun. The stars glittered above, calm and eternal. Marcus lay beside his mother, his head on her lap, finally at peace. Lydia looked at Daniel, her voice trembling with gratitude. "You saved us. You saved my boy." Daniel shook his head gently. "No, Lydia. He saved me. He reminded me what truly matters." His eyes softened as he looked at Marcus. "In protecting him, I remembered who I was meant to be all along." Silence filled the night, not heavy like before, but comforting, like a blanket of calm wrapping around them. The mansion, once echoing with cruelty, now breathed with a new energy, one of justice, hope, and healing. And though the road ahead would not be without challenges, one truth was clear. Cruelty had been unmasked, and compassion had taken its place. In the end, it wasn't wealth or power that defined Daniel Rhodes. It was his courage to stand for what was right, even when it meant standing alone. And that courage, that choice, changed not only his life, but the life of a small boy who would never forget the night a billionaire chose to protect him instead of walking away. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit the like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories that will inspire and surprise you. Your support means the world. See you in the next video.